and Spiraling. The podcast has a name now. Yay! I'm Julia, and I created this podcast as a highly sensitive person for other HSPs. Maybe you have a suspicion that you could be a highly sensitive person, as well as for the people who love us. I have been told for honestly as long as I can remember that I am too sensitive, too emotional, too much, just in general, that I am a crybaby and a drama queen, and I feel things just too deeply. Sometimes my sensitivity does send me into a downward spiral, but after years of misunderstanding my sensitivity, I have shifted my thinking into curiosity, to a more curious mindset. And now I see this character trait of mine not as a flaw at all, but as one of my greatest strengths. And Lord knows, if I was able to figure out after decades of trying to change who I am, to instead understand who I am, I hope you or your loved one can find the comfort that I have found within myself. Every other Thursday, I will be sharing my insight about softness, how I handle overwhelm, and how I embrace my sensitivity instead of trying to fix it. If you are watching me on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you are listening to me on Spotify, please give me a follow. A 5-star review would also be lovely and greatly appreciated, but please only do so if you genuinely feel that way. And if you do not genuinely feel that way, feel free to keep that information to yourself. Because as I mentioned before, I am very sensitive. So what is an HSP? According to health.com, an HSP, or highly sensitive person, is someone with a personality trait called sensory processing sensitivity, or SPS, meaning they have a heightened sensitivity to their physical, emotional, and social environment. This trait is not a disorder, but a normal variation in nervous system wiring, which leads to greater awareness of subtleties and deeper processing of stimuli, but can also result in easier overstimulation or overwhelm. HSPs can often possess strengths like high empathy, creativity, and a deep appreciation for art and beauty. I greatly relate to all of those things. I am looking at a script now because I really want my message to be conveyed in this first episode as clearly as possible. For my visual viewers, sorry, that might be distracting. Now I will tell you a bit more about how I discovered I am an HSP. As I sort of mentioned before, I was always an emotional child, but my ability to feel deeply definitely carried into my teenage years, into my adulthood. I am the type of person that cries when I get angry, and sometimes I cannot watch or listen to certain movies or music just because the effect is so profound and it really is like a full body experience. I don't feel most things in a shallow or light sense. It is possible, it's just not as likely. I went through a season of serious personal growth in my mid-20s, and I finally thought I had sort of cracked the code. From that moment forward, I thought I had my emotions more under control than ever before. And this was after I had entered talk therapy, and especially after I had stopped drinking alcohol at 26. The reason why I originally entered talk therapy was because I had a really bad summer in sort of like my early to mid 20s, and my emotions became so overwhelming, and I honestly became so depressed that I stopped going to work. And that was really shocking and such a wake-up call for me because I had always taken school and work super seriously. So when I couldn't even make it to such an important responsibility like that, I really knew something was wrong. So that was when I initially started talk therapy for the first time in my life. I think I felt like I cracked the code because I was finally facing and processing wounds that I had carried from my childhood into my adulthood through the talk therapy. I had went through a lot of really ugly things in my early life, and at least for me, I have found that I really need to face those things and sit with them and allow my nervous system to feel them as deeply as I need to, or else I have a really hard time moving forward. If I don't sit with those hard feelings, it's likely that they will stick with me into my future, and I feel like they will hinder me from moving on and from growing. So my internal dialogue became kinder, and again, after, especially when I quit drinking, I became much more optimistic, which has never been an easy thing for me. I felt like I could handle hard situations without tearing up, or I guess I should say without tearing up as often. It definitely was still happening, but it wasn't happening on a daily basis anymore. And I finally started feeling confident in who I was, even if I still leaned on the sensitive side. It felt as though for the first time in my life, those two things could coexist. But then I moved abroad at 28, and a whole new season of my life had started. In June of 2024, I moved to the Netherlands. My relationship, love, had brought me here. And I had really high hopes for this new chapter of my life, but little did I know starting over was about to really rock my world. The first thing I noticed only a couple weeks after moving here was that my inner dialogue was getting pretty negative again. I was unemployed, which gave me the freedom to make this big move to a new country, but it also made me feel like I was unsuccessful and unproductive, not to mention I was feeling financially insecure. I was starting to be really emotionally reactive again and not feeling like I could handle situations that made me uncomfortable or did not go to plan. It was as though the resilience that I built within myself was becoming non-existent. I felt like I lost the huge strides of progress that I made from my mid-20s, and it was almost like I felt like my confidence had just disappeared all of a sudden. I was more anxious than ever before. My main struggle with mental health prior to the move, I always resonated more with depressive symptoms, but now it had turned into full-blown anxiety. And doing simple activities like socializing became a huge chore, and I was just exhausted from it. I missed the comforts of my hometown, which is Chicago, and I honestly got to a point where I was pretty terrified to interact with people because I was afraid if someone asked me how I was doing, I would immediately start crying, even if I barely knew this person. So yeah, to put it in pretty simple terms, I felt really fragile, really fragile the first summer that I was here. And really quick, I just wanted to mention that my partner always really wanted to help me, and he was always very eager to help me. He just did not know how. That's actually another huge reason why I wanted to start this podcast, is because I know for a fact not all highly sensitive people are only exclusively dating other highly sensitive people. And we can simply be misunderstood. And if there is a better understanding of this character trait, I think it can really help a lot of people and a lot of relationships. So I started working in September of 2024, and things began to improve for sure, but I was not even close to the spot that I was in before I had moved to the Netherlands. So once I hit my 6-month mark after moving, and I was still feeling extremely uneasy, I turned to what had helped me in the past, which was talk therapy. I entered therapy again in January of 2025, but this time it was CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a very common form of talk therapy here in the Netherlands. And I realized that Although I had learned how to be an emotionally secure person in the comfort of my home country and my hometown of Chicago, I did not have that figured out here in Europe, a whole ocean away. It was like moving abroad unlocked parts of me that I did not know existed, and I had a whole new set of things that I really needed to work on. My Dutch therapist and I identified that my tendency to ruminate, my negative self-talk, catastrophizing, and lack of self-care was holding me back from thriving in this new environment. And even though I had so much going for me here, my internal world was screaming for help, so I had no choice but to listen. I was using unhealthy safety strategies, and I won't go into too much detail as to what those were right now, just because I need to figure out how to communicate those things without getting too personal. But I will give just one pretty innocent example, which is distraction. I was using YouTube constantly. I was watching YouTube, listening to YouTube, using it as a huge distraction because I just could not fathom or utter being in silence with myself and just being stuck with my innermost thoughts. That was really scary at that time. So I was using YouTube as this sort of unhealthy safety strategy to distract myself from myself. My mom brought up the term highly sensitive person to me it was either June or July of this year, of 2025, and something really clicked. I watched the movie Sensitive, The Untold Story, which is a 2015 documentary that actually features the singer Alanis Morissette, and as well listened to her podcast episode on We Can Do Hard Things, because she herself identifies as a highly sensitive person. And although I did not relate to everything in the movie and the podcast, certain aspects really resonated with me. And I think, like most things, sensitivity is a bit of a scale, like it has a range. And the level can vary person to person and even season to season in someone's life. But hearing other people experience what I experienced was super reassuring. And the more I understood about myself, the less shame I felt about myself. I realized that my spirals needed space for understanding rather than me trying to ignore them or avoid them and feel really embarrassed or guilty about them. Hearing people accept themselves for who they are was honestly liberating. And accepting my sensitivity allows me to fully process my emotions instead of bottling them up or pushing them down. Nonetheless, though, to be completely honest, this topic is pretty scary to talk about out loud and in such an outspoken way, because sometimes I feel like the word sensitivity or that character trait has become sort of derogatory. Like, people don't want to be associated or come off as sensitive, like it's a really negative thing. But I am hoping to redefine what sensitivity can mean so that others don't have to feel the same shame and discomfort about themselves like I once did. A huge reason why I created this podcast is because I want a place where sensitivity isn't seen as a flaw. I wanted a place to talk about messy and emotional, spiraling human moments without pretending to be together all the time, because I'm not. I'm just not. As I stated before, who I'm really talking to in this podcast is other people that identify as highly sensitive or slightly sensitive. Maybe you have an inkling or a feeling that you could be, as well as people that love someone who identifies as highly sensitive and hope to have a better understanding of those people that are really close to them in their lives. This podcast is really for anyone who also feels really deeply and does go through the downward spiral and is tired of trying to be less sensitive to either fit in or feel like they need to be less sensitive in order to have a fulfilling life. Some upcoming topics that I will go over is how sensitivity affects the relationships in my life, whether that be my relationship with my significant other, with my boyfriend, with my family, with my friends, relationships at work, as well as the relationship with myself, how I deal with overwhelm and what I have found really works for me, as well as what really does not work for me through my life experience, what really hinders and hurts my relationship with my sensitivity, and a huge one at that is alcohol. Alcohol and Julia, the highly sensitive person, those two things really did not mix. I will be posting every other Thursday, and I do plan to be pretty candid and personal on the podcast. But if I am ever talking about my relationships with other people, I will likely keep things private just for respect of their privacy. So what I'm really hoping that this podcast will do is, first of all, give sensitive people a space to feel not so alone, because I promise you there's a lot of us, to encourage the understanding of sensitivity and seeing spirals or tough moments as learning opportunities instead of something you need to run from or hide from. I also want to show how sensitivity can really be a huge strength. Our ability to be really attuned to other people's energy, our ability to care for others, and we have this power to put ourselves in other people's shoes, probably a lot easier than people that do not identify as highly sensitive. And I really want to touch on and explain how crying can be a very taboo thing. Crying can make people really uncomfortable, but I think that crying is also a huge relief and release, and it's a way for us to get back to a balanced nervous system. So it isn't something that we should be suppressing all the time. It should be something that we utilize as a tool to help ourselves. I really hope to help others understand themselves better, even if it's just one person, and encourage nurturing their sensitivity, because it could be really less complicated than you think. Something as simple as setting boundaries in order to protect your heightened senses. Instead of telling yourself to just stop worrying, overanalyzing, overthinking, listening to your body's cues and think to yourself, what is my body trying to tell me? So my hope here really is to build somewhat of a community, even if it's a small one. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this short introduction. I'm really excited and really inspired about my vision for this podcast. It has taken me a while to really clear up and complete what the vision even looks like for me, but now I feel like I finally have it down. So thanks again, and I will talk to you guys in 2 weeks. Bye!